Hello there. You're watching All 24 News World News program live here in Algiers with me, Karim Zachary. These are today's top stories. Ukrainian forces hit Russia's Black Sea Fleet flagship with missiles, sinking it. Zionist security forces raided Al-Aqsa Mosque in a violent campaign against Palestinian civilians before dawn, as thousands of worshippers gathered for prayers. The death toll from devastating floods in South Africa has risen to 341 as search and rescue operations continue. Those were today's headlines. Fast in our news, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in an evening video address, warned that the Donbas region is the main target of the Russian forces seeking to destroy. He added that Russian ships can only go to the bottom, while the Russian flagship in the Black Sea sank after being hit by a Ukrainian missile, according to Kiev.
За 50 днів повномасштабного вторгнення
The main target for Russia is Donbass. Russia wants to destroy it in the first place. No one was sure that we would survive. Everyone sympathized. Many advised to leave the country, advised to actually surrender to oppression. But they didn't know us either. And they did not know how brave Ukrainians are, how much we value freedom. Russian ships can only go to the bottom.
хіба що на дно.
Ukrainian officials said their forces hit the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet with missiles sinking the ship. For its part, Russia said that Moskva was badly damaged by a fire that forced the warship's evacuation, but that it was still afloat. The U.S. was not able to confirm Ukraine's claims of striking the warship, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Thursday. Still, he called it a big blow to Russia.
So we've been in touch with the Ukrainians overnight who have said that they struck the ship with anti-ship missiles. We don't have the capacity at this point to independently verify that, but certainly the way that this unfolded, it's a big blow to Russia. This is their flagship, the Moscow, and they have now been forced to admit that it has been badly damaged, and they've had to kind of choose between two stories. One story is that it was just incompetence, and the other was that they came under attack, and neither is a particularly good outcome for them.
The Pentagon spokesman John Kirby remains cautious after authorities in southern Ukraine claimed heavy damage to the Russian flagship in the Black Sea. He also clarified that according to the Pentagon, Kiev remains threatened, in particular by airstrikes, despite the withdrawal of Russian troops.
We cannot confirm the Ukrainian reports that it was hit by a missile, but we are also not in a position to refute that it could have been a Ukrainian missile which struck the ship. We do believe that there was a significant explosion on this cruiser, the Moskva, of the Slava class of cruisers in the Russian Navy. We do believe that that explosion caused a significant fire, which as of this morning was still raging aboard the ship.
Loud explosions were heard in the Ukrainian capital Kiev early Friday, and air raid sirens sounded across the country as residents prepared for fresh Russian attacks after Russia's main warship sank in the Black Sea following a fire. Russia announced that it had destroyed a weapons factory in a suburb of Kiev, confirming that it would intensify its strikes on the Ukrainian capital in response to attacks launched by Ukraine inside Russian territory. The strategic port city of Mariupol is completely devastated, which led civilians to live surrounded by graves and destroyed buildings that they built themselves. Marwa Blaiwer in what follows.
In Mariupol, Ukrainians live among destroyed buildings and graves. The strategic port city of Mariupol was surrounded by Russian troops from the beginning of what Moscow calls its special military operation in Ukraine.
I'm homeless. My apartment is totally destroyed. I moved in 3 months ago, in a new apartment recently renovated.
Galina Vasilyeva, a retired worker who worked in the construction sector, now looks around the ruins of the devastated Ukrainian city that she once helped to build.
This building has to be totally demolished. It's completely burnt, and there are burnt people lying in there. They have to tear it down and build a new one.
Authorities in Kiev say Russia deliberately bombed the theater in Mariupol, while Moscow accuses a Ukrainian nationalist battalion of blowing up the theater themselves in order to blame it on Russia.
People were living and improving their living conditions. They had just started building the city, investing a lot of money in it. I didn't find a job here until 2 years ago.
While the official death toll is unknown, thousands of civilians are believed to have died in the besieged city, while others have survived with hardly any food or water and no electricity. Conquering the city of Mariupol would connect Russia-controlled Crimea to the territories of Moscow-backed separatists in the east.
Anti-mine soldiers in Ukraine moved outside the Kiev suburb of Brovary in order to clean the area from explosives planted by retreating Russian forces. Russia called off its northern offensive to take Kiev at the end of March. Hossein Berkan in the following.
If you walk without looking at your feet, you can easily miss them. Plate-seized anti-tank mines nestled in the ground north of Kiev. Every step is a bet. But a team of Ukrainian soldiers moved there, cleaning the area full of explosive planted by retreating Russian forces, which were defeated, according to Valery, a military brigadier general.
They were defeated in the Battle of Kiev and retreated north. They retreated very quickly, but they still took the time to undermine the bridge, which is 100 meters away, and also took the time to mine the roads around the bridges so that our tanks and equipment couldn't get around the bridge.
Every action is a gamble, says Max, a member of a military demining team, and explaining the techniques they use to detect the mines and avoid the trap.
These rods go to up 10 centimeters into the ground because anti-tank mines are usually not placed more than 10 centimeters deep. As soon as the rod hits a metal object, we know that there is a mine.
Most of the mines are anti-tanks, but they might explode if anybody tried to move them, Alexander pointed out.
Some of these mines, anti-tank mines, generally do not react to the presence of a person. They are placed on a decompression device or trap, which triggers the mine when someone tries to move it.
Russian troops withdrew from North Kiev at the end of the first phase of the special military operation, but strikes will soon resume according to the Russian authorities.
Amid international sanctions, Russian President Vladimir Putin called at a televised government meeting on energy sector for diversification of Russian energy exports from Europe to Asia because of the crisis caused by its military operation in Ukraine. Putin accused the Europeans of destabilizing the market by moving to cut out Russian hydrocarbons. He also criticized moves by European countries to stop using Russian energy.
European countries constantly talk about denying Russian energy supplies, which further destabilizes the market and drives up prices on their own initiative. We need to diversify exports. It is assumed that in the future the supply of energy resources to the West will decrease. Therefore, it is important to consolidate the trend of recent years, redirect step-by-step our exports to the markets in the South and East, which are growing rapidly.
Christine Lagarde, president of the European Central Bank, declared that the war in Ukraine is having a severe impact on the Eurozone economy, while the surge in energy disrupted supply chains and declining confidence are clouding the outlook.
The war in Ukraine is severely affecting the euro area economy and has significantly increased uncertainty. The impact of the war on the economy will depend on how the conflict evolves, on the effect of current sanctions, and on possible further measures.
U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price tells reporters that Russia has considerable firepower after forces pull out of Kiev and warns of forces repositioning themselves at the south and east to begin what the U.S. believes to be a coordinated campaign against those areas.
The Russians have quite a bit of firepower, in part because they've been defeated in the Battle of Kyiv, a battle that senior Russian officials apparently thought that they would be able to win within a couple days of initiating it in February. We're now some 6 weeks into this conflict, and Russian forces have been repelled from Kyiv and are now repositioning to the south and the east to begin what we believe to be a concerted campaign against those areas. So,
U.S. President Joe Biden has stated that he's planning to send top officials to Ukraine. At a summit next month, European Union leaders aim to consider joint gas imports in order to avoid competing for alternative energy suppliers while cutting imports from Russia.
Couldn't hear you.
Will you send officials to Ukraine? Will you send senior officials to Ukraine?
We're making that decision now. Thank you.
Who would you send?
What was the reason? You ready to go? Yeah.
And on Thursday, the United Kingdom announced an agreement with Rwanda to transfer certain asylum seekers hundreds of miles to the East African country, claiming that the scheme will prevent people traffickers from sending desperate refugees on perilous journeys across the English Channel. The idea was condemned by UK opposition MPs and refugee organizations as harsh, impractical, and a waste of public funds. And the UN claimed it highlighted a number of human rights issues.
So from today, our new migration and economic development partnership will mean that anyone entering the UK illegally, as well as those who have arrived illegally since January the 1st, may now be relocated to Rwanda. This innovative approach, driven by our shared humanitarian impulse and made possible by Brexit freedoms, will provide safe and legal routes for asylum while disrupting the business model of the gangs. Because
CIA Director, William Burns has outlined major threats facing the United States, pointing to China's rise on the world stage and Russia's ongoing military offensive in Ukraine as top challenges, while declaring that U.S. intelligence had entered a new era.
A silent partner in Putin's aggression, Xi Jinping's China is our greatest challenge, in many ways the most profound test that CIA has ever faced. The People's Republic of China is a formidable competitor, lacking in neither ambition nor capability. It seeks to overtake us in literally every domain, from economic strength to military power and from space to cyberspace. Its rise has been remarkable.
In Romania, a few hundred kilometers from Crimea, the airbase of Mihail is a hotspot for NATO. 6 Typhoon fighter jets and 200 British soldiers from the Royal Air Force have come to lend a hand to the Romanian pilots for air policing missions. The NATO center in Torrejon, Spain, alerts pilots when an unidentified aircraft approaches Atlantic Alliance airspace. The Romanians and the British must take off within 15 minutes, which was considered pressure for Romanian Air Force. On Thursday, a team of U.S. congressmen led by prominent China critics Bob Menendez and Lindsey Graham arrived in Taiwan for a 2-day visit, as Beijing promised severe measures in reaction. The delegation of 6 U.S. legislators is the latest in a series of foreign politicians to visit Taiwan in defiance of Beijing's efforts to isolate the island republic.
We're here to support Taiwan. Our relationship is rock solid. And when a country like Taiwan has 90% of the high-end semiconductor industry, it is a country of global significance, of global economic consequence. And those who wish Taiwan ill must understand that the global community will look at that and say we cannot allow Taiwan to be negatively impacted because the world's interests are involved.
Zionist security forces raided Al-Aqsa Mosque in a violent campaign against Palestinian civilians before dawn, as thousands of worshippers gathered for praise during the holy month of Ramadan, setting off clashes that medics said wounded schools of Palestinians. Usama Ayadi.
At least 150 Palestinian civilians were injured after clashes with Zionist forces in Al-Aqsa Mosque. This comes after the eruption of fierce confrontations between the worshippers and the Zionist forces which attacked the mosque a day earlier.
Today there was an invasion of Al-Aqsa Mosque for the second time. The first during the dawn prayer and the second when women and men were oppressed, as well as all the people who were in the courtyard of the mosque. The second attack occurred at 8:30 a.m. The assault was inside Al-Aqsa Mosque, Masjid Qibli.
According to local media, Zionist forces used tear gas and live ammunition against Palestinians, as 90 people were seriously injured and taken to the nearest hospitals.
More than 80 young people present inside the Holy Mosque were moved. This repression and barbarism are committed by the occupation to suppress our people and empty the Al-Aqsa Mosque.
This comes after the Palestinian Ministry of Health announced that 35 Palestinians were seriously injured in last night's clashes between locals and Zionists in Nablus in the West Bank. Also during the clashes that broke out between the Palestinians and the Zionist regime's forces on Thursday in Jenin, 2 civilians were martyred and 6 others were severely injured.
The occupation knows that Al-Aqsa Mosque is a red line not to be crossed. For this mosque, we sacrifice our hearts and our blood, and we condemn this act on behalf of our people and all those present at the mosque.
Palestinian Ministry of Health stated that the Palestinian youngster who was wounded in the Jenin last night during hostilities with the Zionists has been martyred today due to the severity of his injuries. Reports also stated that at least 400 people were arrested by the Zionist forces in the last 2 days around the Al-Aqsa region during the clashes, as the situation is moving to a more dangerous stage in one of the holy regions for Muslims.
After 30 hours of blocking, the students who occupied the Sorbonne in Paris left the university Thursday evening a little before midnight. These students had gathered in the streets in a tense clash with the police since the day before to denounce the false choice which constitutes the duel between Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen in the second round of the presidential election. Many of the students said they'd rather abstain in the runoff than put a Macron vote in the ballot box to block Le Pen from winning power. New members of Somalia's parliament are sworn in after long delayed elections and a chaotic poll marked by violence and a power struggle between the country's leaders. The swearing-in ceremony of some 300 members of the upper house took place under high security in Mogadishu.
The event took place at the capital's strongly guarded Hala military base, which was surrounded by sandbagged fences and towering concrete walls. Somali police and African Union forces were dispatched to the neighboring district, effectively shutting off Mogadishu.
It's an enormous honor for me to be present at this historic ceremony, which commemorates the swearing of legislators of the 11th Parliament of the Federal Republic of Somalia for both houses, following a long delay electoral process hampered by numerous impediments.
Somalia's 290 new legislators promised good change, moving the nation closer to concluding a protected electoral process tainted by allegations of corruption and anomalies.
I'm very happy to be here today and to witness the swearing-in ceremony of the 11th Somali Parliament.
Several more legislators have still to be chosen and sworn in. Later, legislators will elect speakers and deputies for both chambers of parliament before convening to pick a new president.
The country has gone through difficult times and the election has been dragging on for about 2 years. The country is moving in the right direction by holding this election in time. The legislators should be elected soon and then a new president will be elected, after which the country will have a new government.
The inauguration of legislators, according to Hussein Sheikh Ali of the Mogadishu-based research organization Hira Institute, marks tremendous relieving day for all Somalis and the international community who invested in Somalia to go ahead.
That was Sofian Kinturi reporting. And in other topical news, landslides and flooding caused by tropical storm Maggie have claimed at least 115 lives in the Philippines, according to official reports released Thursday. Dozens of people are still missing as the storm, the strongest to hit the archipelago this year, has forced tens of thousands of people to seek refuge in evacuation centers. Rescuers move bodies of landslide victims in the Philippines' Leyte province as the aftermath of Tropical Storm Maggie, which left a disaster in the region. Spanish police dismantled two criminal gangs that provided logistical services for the trafficking of hashish in boats on the Catalan coast. A total of 51 people were arrested and nearly 10 tons of drugs were seized. For so many years, Spain became a transit of drugs between Africa, Latin America, and Europe. Pakistan's military establishment has ousted Prime Minister Imran Khan's claims that he was the victim of a US-led conspiracy and described his visit to Moscow on the day Russia invaded Ukraine as embarrassing. Major General Babar Liftikar, the army spokesperson, denied Khan's assertions that Pakistan's National Security Committee had concluded last month that there was a conspiracy to end the former cricket star's premiership. The death toll from devastating floods in South Africa has risen to 341 as search and rescue operations continue in KwaZulu-Natal province. The situation in the region, coupled with droughts in other parts of Durban, paved the way for a deeper conversation into the impact of climate change on Africa. Miriam Zian.
341 is the number of lives that have been lost following the devastating floods in South Africa's eastern coastal province of KwaZulu-Natal, and there are fears that the number may increase as the days go by. Rescuers have turned to helicopters in search for survivors as the coastal province experiences heavy downpours that swept away bridges, homes, vehicles and roads.
Current number, but the devastation is quite vast. I mean, every single little stream or tributary turned out into a raging river. There's a lot of houses that have collapsed, a lot of buildings that have been washed away. The community is affected in a massive way. I think it's going to take, I've been working in search and rescue for almost 20 years. I am a Natal boy, so I'm from here, and this is the worst disaster that I've seen hit Natal in 20 years.
President Cyril Ramaphosa declared the region a state of disaster to unlock relief funds, but despite accommodating more than 2,100 shelters, it was not enough, as the protests in some areas indicate.
No, there's not enough space. There's not enough space. This community hall is too small for them, but because they got no other option.
Residents in one village leaned precariously on the edge of a collapsed road, hoping to get clean water from a broken pipe underneath them.
It's been so hard for us, and even water, electricity, in some other areas there isn't any water, electricity. As you can see, how we suffering.
Ramaphosa declared the disaster as a catastrophe of enormous proportions, adding that it is part of climate change.
We are going to treat this disaster with the level of seriousness that it requires.
Climate experts say this is the heaviest rainfall in 60 years, pointing to global warming as a major factor to the rainfall.
North Korea is celebrating the 110th birthday of its deceased state founder which calls for stronger loyalty to leader Kim Jong-un. A youth ball at the Kim Tu-sung Square is Pyongyang, and musical performance in commemoration of the anniversary is taking place. After the performance, fireworks will be set off center on the tower of the Juchidea in the capital. It added with other similar events. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our news comes to a close. Thank you for keeping it here on All 24 News with me, Karim Fazakari. Bye for now.